We're talking today with Jimmy Jamieson of Kentwood, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Jimmy, start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Newport News, Virginia in 1946. My dad was in the service. He got back from the war, and we lived there. Moved to Michigan, that's where he's from, and went to 4 schools here. Ended up graduating from Rogers High School.
Okay.
Went to Grand Rapids Junior College.
So Rogers is in Wyoming, Michigan, which is a Grand Rapids suburb. Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And what was your father doing for work then, once you're up in Michigan?
He was he worked for Johnson's Furniture. He was a foreman in the yard there, yard foreman. Mm-hmm. And then he ended up working for Herb Lumber, and it became Carlisle Lumber and stuff like that. And so I went to Lee, Granville, Newaygo, and then Rogers, which is, there was a Wyoming Park High School mm-hmm. and a Rogers High School, and they combined the two a couple years ago. And that's where
okay.
I went.
So basically you grew up in West Michigan, all right. And then when did you finish high school?
I graduated in '65.
Okay.
And then I went to Grand Rapids Junior College mm-hmm. then. We nicknamed it Raider High, of course, and I wanted to be a school teacher. I wanted to do industrial arts, shop teacher. Mm-hmm. And so I was taking engineering classes there, and I got drafted in February. And
okay. Now, if you're in college, did you not have a deferment, or?
No. Back then, if you were single and over 18, they didn't care what your grade point was. They didn't care what you were doing. I went to the draft board, and they gave me an extension so that I finally got drafted in July. They let me finish the semester out.
Right. Well, how many credit hours were you taking?
I was going full-time. I had 12.
Okay.
I mean, that's full.
Yeah, I mean, because I guess I've interviewed other people who get drafted around the time you did, and as long as they had a full load, then they didn't get drafted. But they didn't do that for you.
No, they, myself, a couple of my high school buddies, we were all going to JC. We all got drafted at the same time. And he ended up going to Korea, and another one went to Germany. And
so you go in July of '66. Then where do they send you for basic training?
Well, I guess I was kind of important because they sent me to Fort Knox in Kentucky, which is armor, hell on wheels. And I was there for 13 days, and then that didn't work out, so they sent me down to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, the 101st Airborne. I took my basic training there.
Okay, but when you're in basic, I mean, Fort Knox was sort of the standard place for guys from Michigan to go for Army basic training for pretty much anything. And then and Fort Campbell at that point was setting up to do the same thing, and they took the overflow from other places. So what did your basic training consist of?
At Fort Campbell, Kentucky, they trained us as airborne. Hopefully they could, because airborne is volunteer only. Mm-hmm. And so our instructors were all Rangers. Our captain, company commander, was a Green Beret guy. Mm-hmm. So you didn't walk on base, you ran. Airborne ran everywhere. And so that's how we were trained on Paul Bunyan's gym stuff. We stayed in barracks that hadn't been used since 1951. No windows in them, no doors were on them. We had to nail doors up with 2x4s, and you know, it's just old stuff, and that was our basic. So they pretty much convinced us that we were indestructible. I mean, the bullets would bounce off our chest. They had us so convinced.
So at this stage, it's still the 101st guys who were doing a lot of the actual training.
Yes.
You haven't yet created a conventional training cadre for larger numbers of guys.
Right.
And they're just opening this up for basic. Okay, so you get the benefit of that, I guess. How much of an emphasis was there on discipline, following orders, that kind of thing?
Very much so. Then they could hit you over the head with a nightstick. You know, if you're marching, you're out of step. Call you names, of course. It was, they really couldn't hit you. But if you were out of step, they'd reach in with a nightstick and wrap you on the, because you wore a helmet liner. pardon me, and if you were out of step, they'd put the stick in between your legs, and of course you'd fall. Then the next guy would fall, and then the next guy would fall. And as far as the discipline went, if you were screwing up, they would make the whole squad, platoon, do push-ups while you stood there and watched. So they created teamwork. They wanted you to depend on each other and protect each other. And so that was real mind-opening. That was an experience that I had never experienced before, is learning to depend on somebody.
Okay.
And
now, how long did it take you to kind of adjust to that, or adjust to life in the Army?
You got to remember, I'm from a military family, so about 3 weeks. Once you get over the being homesick, and you learn to meet your fellow troopers, that was the hard. In my case, I stuttered. I could hardly get a word out sometimes. I had a hard time in high school. I went to 4 different speech schools because I stuttered so bad. And so when you take harassment from your friends, supposedly, and guys in the Army would pick on you, the bullying effect, you know. And so I wouldn't talk much, but when your platoon sergeant or your squad leader heard what was going on, he would jump all over him, because he's your fellow teammate. You don't pick on your teammates. So that was learned by the company, the squad, the platoon, that even though I stuttered, you didn't make fun of them. So you worked as a team. You learned that real quick.
Okay. Now, was following orders something that came fairly naturally?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had no problem following orders.
Now, were there some other guys that you were training with who had more trouble with that?
Oh yeah. You know, they're the alpha male. I say the alpha male, and I turned 21 in Vietnam, so I was older than a lot of the folks in our outfit. So, and coming from a military family, I learned not to volunteer for anything, and that was, I'm not going to say easy for me, but I knew how to play the game, if that's what you want to call it.
Right. And were you in good physical shape when you went in?
Yes. In high school, I wrestled for 4 years and played tennis, ran track. Played 1 year of football. I was too small, so I did the other stuff. But I was in pretty good shape, yeah. It didn't take long for me to, you know, on your marches and your runs. Here again in Airborne, you know, I say Airborne. I was not in Airborne,
right,
but I was trained by Airborne,
So they just took the kind of sort of particularly hard-nosed approach to it that we associate with the airborne training.
Yeah, you run in place, or you do a double time thing. You didn't. Once we learned how to march, that was fine. But then if you were going to go to the rifle range, or you had to go to get your shots, you didn't march. You double time jog in place, and you better be in step. So the airborne runs no matter where they go.
All right. Now, how long did the basic last?
8 weeks, I believe it was.
And where do they send you next?
Fort Meade, Maryland.
Okay. What were you doing there?
Field artillery. No, scratch that. Fort Sill. I'm ahead of myself.
Okay.
Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And there I was trained on the 105 howitzer. And that was, here again, we stayed in barracks that were used in 1950, old wooden barracks, nothing new. All Vietnam instructors. At the end, we were, they put up on a board, you know, like Germany, Korea, here and Hawaii and Vietnam. And so I looked at all that. Now, this is where you guys are going to go. They didn't know who was going to go, but this is where this unit is going to send troops. So I had heard stories about Korea is 13 months, Germany is 18 months, and they only wanted like 5 people to go to Hawaii. and that was like 13 or 18 months. So I didn't. So a whole bunch of us guys said, of course, you got to remember now, we're invincible, okay? The bullets are going to bounce off his chest and blah, 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 blah. So we volunteered for Vietnam.
Okay. Now, before we move forward, let's go back. What does the artillery training consist of?
The artillery?
Artillery training. So what are you doing while you're at Fort Sill?
You are learning the velocities of the 105 howitzer, how it works, what the projectile and how all that is put together. Projectile is 33 pounds. It's a semi-fixed. In other words, it comes in a wooden box, and then your powder charge is there, your projectile, and your brass. So whatever the fire mission is, whatever the FDC, fire direction control, and wherever the mission is, they will tell you how far and what elevation. It's deflection quadrant. Then you would pick the right powder charge, or they tell you what powder charge, and then you would put that in the canister and then affix the projectile to it. And then the fuse, whatever fuse that they wanted, impact fuse, HE is explosive round, and so on, a delayed fuse, or if you're going to shoot white phosphorus, you know, Willie P, we call it. So you learn all that and how to lay the guns. Depending on how you want the rounds to hit, you would lay the gun in that fashion. One gun is base piece. So in other words, that's the most accurate gun. Of the 6 guns, base piece is the most accurate. And then they would lay the gun in a lazy W if they wanted the rounds to hit like that, or straight line effect, or in behind each other. So you learn all that. And then you would go out into the prairie, and the Airborne was to infiltrate us. And that was one of their night jumps they had to do. And so you could see these guys falling out of the sky, and we would break up into 3 and 4 man teams, and we'd go out and capture them. Now they were supposed to infiltrate us, but we captured most of them.
Okay, the parachute is a little bit of a giveaway.
Well, it was supposed to be a night jump, but it really wasn't a night jump, so we could see them and we knew where they landed and stuff like that. So yeah.
All right. Now, did you learn all of the different jobs on a gun?
Yes. There's a powder man and a gunner and a radio man, and because I stuttered, I couldn't be a radio man because you have to repeat deflection in quadrants. And if I have trouble with like nines, and you don't say 9, you say niner. Oh, niner or 7, you know. So they kept me off the radio. I could answer the radio and say fire mission, so I could do radio watch. You'd stand watch and that kind of thing. But yeah, they kept me off the radio because we didn't want to blow somebody else up. So.
All right. Now, was this a towed weapon, something you'd pull behind a vehicle?
The 105 is a towed vehicle, or a towed howitzer, yes.
Okay. And it was that the variety that had a split trail where you open up the two
the
legs?
trails split up, and then they had spades on the back, and they would hog into the ground. And you would put it up on a jack, and it's set on a pedestal, so the wheels were off the ground. Same thing with the 155 howitzer towed vehicle. You had a deuce-and-a-half truck that towed it, and that's what I had in Vietnam, started out on.
All right. Okay. And how many men would normally be on a gun crew, or what's the official number?
7 on a 105, 11 on a 155. But in Vietnam, the most we ever had was 6. If you include the gun sergeant or the chief, the gun chief, he made 7. But he was the tell-E, you know, and we're the do-E. So.
Right. Okay. And then, did you have? Would you have a machine gun with a gun, or any kind of defensive weapons, or just what your personal weapons would be?
Once I got to Vietnam, now I really don't know what's in a 105 gun battery, because I was never sent to one of them in Vietnam. But when I got to Vietnam and we had the 155s, you have a 50 caliber mounted on a tripod. and then each gun section has a 50, an M60, which is the 308 M60 machine gun, and then you have a M79 grenade launcher, which is called a thump gun. We called it that, or a blooper. Infantry calls it a blooper. And then you had your individual rifle, which then was an M14, and mine was a M14 with a selector switch on it. So we also had a full automatic. And each gun section has a 12-gauge shotgun, and mine happened to be a Stevens.
Okay. So in Vietnam, you had a lot of firepower.
Had a lot of firepower.
Which you would need, but we're not there all the way there yet. Okay. But basically, you're training only on 105s at Fort
Yep.
Sill? Okay.
Yep.
And how long does that training last?
8 to 10 weeks,
Yeah.
I believe. How long that? I think that's.
The standard is 8 weeks. And
Yeah.
it can vary a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah.
Okay. Now, once you completed that, now what do you do?
Well, the last 2 weeks of it, they asked for people who wanted to be Rangers. And there's Ranger Airborne, and then there's straight Rangers back then. So I thought, oh, what the heck, you know. So I volunteered Rangers. So we'd get up at 4:30 in the morning before everybody else gets up, and you're in your green T-shirt, your green boxer shorts, and your black combat boots, and you're running, and you run, and you do Ranger training for a couple, 3 hours, and then you go do your stuff, and that went on for 2 weeks, and then I got sent to, I don't know if we're that far yet or not,
Yeah.
but I got sent to, after I volunteered and home on leave, I got sent to Pleiku, which is up in the northern part of Vietnam, with the 75th
All right.
Rangers.
So you did so the only Ranger training you had in the States was actually at Fort Sill.
Correct.
As part of your AIT.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how long a leave did they give you home? Was that a month or?
I had 30 days.
30 days. Okay. And then how do they actually get you to Vietnam?
On a C-141 troop transport. There was 150 of us in there, and then Jeeps. They had Jeeps in there, and then pallets of duffel bags. So you marched in, you had rows and rows and rows of seats, and then you're sitting backwards, and you're looking at duffel bags and a couple of Jeeps they had sideways on wooden skids or metal skids. And that's the whole flight.
All right. So no chartered commercial plane for you.
No.
Okay. Where did you fly out of?
California, what is that? Right out of Los Angeles, not Clark Air Force Base. What's, I can't remember the name of that base.
Let's see, Edwards or El Toro or
No,
El Toro's Marines.
San Francisco.
Well, San Francisco has Travis.
Travis Air Force Base.
There we are.
There you are, yeah.
Okay. And then did you stop any place on the way?
Guam to refuel.
Right.
We got out, stretched our legs, a couple hours dilly-dallying around, and then we got back on and flew.
Okay.
And
then you landed then at Pleiku.
Pleiku, yep.
Okay.
And there I was there for just a short time, did some Ranger training. We, the Chinook helicopter, and they would drop the cargo net out the back, and you're loaded up with your rucksack and your rifle, and you'd climb down this net, and then you'd run along the ground for 50 yards, and then you'd climb back up and practice your compasses and did basic infantry stuff. And that didn't last because I was going to be in field artillery attached to the 75th Ranger Battalion.
Okay.
So
you did a little bit of what the Rangers do, but the expectation is that
Right.
you're not really running around in the jungle with them.
right, I'm not going to be a Ranger. Wear Ranger tabs and stuff like that. So
All right.
LURPs or whatever they call them now. But
Yeah. So now you do the training with the unit, and then now what do they do with you?
well, they was getting ready to assign me to a unit. Well, then somehow somebody got a call that said 1st Infantry Division needs replacements. So they loaded up 18 of us on a Caribou 16 and flew us down to Zion, or actually it's Camp Alpha in Saigon. And then I got assigned to the 8th Battalion, 6th Artillery.
Okay.
And
And
in
that,
Vietnam, First Infantry Division.
right,
So.
okay. And now this was going to be, and then what kind of guns do you have there now?
There, they flew me out in the field because they were out in the field. They weren't in a base camp.
Right.
And I'm on a towed 155 howitzer. And I was assigned to the base piece, number 4 gun. Sergeant Morgan was our gun chief, section leader. And so that was my home for the next year and 3 days. So.
Okay. Now, when you joined that gun crew, what role do you have on the crew?
I was considered, they just assigned me a number. I was a number 2 man, which is the powder man. But of a 11-man crew, there's 6 of us, so you're the powder man, you're the projectile man, you're the track driver, you're the machine gunner on top, you do everything, the radio man. Everybody does everything. And so the numbers didn't mean anything.
All right. And what's your, when they fly you out, you're going out in a helicopter to join the unit in the field?
Yep, on a
Okay.
Huey.
And when you kind of first come in and join them, what is your impression or what do you see when you land?
Holy, what am I getting into? The helicopter ride was kind of cool. You know, you take off from a base camp and it's just really nice. But when you go out into the field, because of the snipers and whatnot, now you got to remember this is not the perimeter is not much. There's no concertina wire, very seldom concertina wire. It's just, oh geez, there's howitzers there and whatnot, you know, and holy crap. So, but they come in and then they go around and they land like right now. It's just like you're a rock falling out of the sky because they don't want to get shot at. And yeah, so when they come in fast, tail down, set it down. When they take off, the nose drops, and man, they're gone. They're total. Yeah, it's like riding in an elevator about twice as fast, you know.
All right. And so they just get you off the helicopter, and then what kind of reception do you get when you join the unit?
Oh, are you the new grunt? Are you the new guy? Yeah. All right. Where's the CP? Over there, and go report in. So you'd go report in to the first sergeant and tell them who you are, and they welcome you in the beautiful southern vacation land, you know, and blah 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 blah. Grab your blankety blank and come with me, and you know. So the first sergeant took me down there, introduced me to Sergeant Morgan, and that was it. And then he did the rest. That was.
Right. So did Sergeant Morgan and the other people in the crew, did they actually try to orient you and tell you what to do?
Oh yeah, yep. Okay. They were very friendly. Where are you from? What, you know, what do you do? Blah 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 blah. So you know, it's like reading. You know, oh, we finally got something to read. You know, we got a new guy. We'll ask him questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. All right. So you're not being shut out by the group or anything else like that. You're right in there.
No, they were very friendly. Got to know them a lot. Yeah.
Okay, and so now, and how many guns were in the battery?
6.
Okay, and were they all together at the time you joined them?
Yeah, we were, of course, they're all laid out, and we use what they call the lazy W. And the bursting radius of a 155 howitzer is 65 meters. So they're laid out in a lazy W like this, and then back, and then like this. And we're base piece, we're number 4 gun here. So everything overlapped. So the guns are like 30 meters apart, so that when the shells land, they overlap. And anything in that bursting radius is dead. If the shrapnel doesn't get you, the concussion will. It'll blow your eyeballs right out of your head. So, yeah, that's how you laid the guns. And they weren't GPS like they are now. It's with aiming stakes, so you'd have to put aiming stakes out and stuff like that. So, yeah, it was really interesting to, and here again, the 155s, they're up on a pedestal too, just like the 105s, with the spades. And so you hope you don't end up in a base camp someplace where they'll fall through, which ours did, but anyway, yeah.
All right. And now in the field like this, would they dig gun pits that the guns would go in, or were they just sitting up there on the
Just
ground?
sitting up in the air.
So high profile and people can
Very
shoot at
high
you.
profile.
Okay. And what was the first night like?
Scary, very scary. It's on my part. The guys that had been there for a while were old hat, you know, and you keep score. I'm a short timer or I'm a long timer, you know, and you keep calendar but jumpy, very jumpy. What's this noise? That's just somebody over there snipering, or guns would go off and you'd come up off the floor, and very nerve-wracking, which didn't help my stuttering any. And you know, fire mission. Well, then, okay, now what? You know, I've never trained on a 155, so they didn't put me on powder right away because putting the proper powder charge in there. I was a loader for quite a while. You just pick the round up and throw it. And now you have loaders, but they're too slow. So you got to remember, I'm like 118 pounds, and I'm picking up a 97-pound projectile, and you put on a 3-pound fuse, so it's basically 100 pounds, and I'm picking it up and putting it into the tube and then launching it, loading it with, and you got to jam it into the lands and grooves so it doesn't fall back out. Then put your powder charge in, then close the breech block. And then you've got to put a primer in there, which is actually a blank of a 38 special. So you put that in there, close the primer thing, and then there's a lanyard. And then the gunner would, you know, if they say fire, then you'd pull the lanyard and the gun recoils back. So I was a loader, and I'd fire the gun, and stuff that didn't have a whole lot of responsibility to it because I was the newbie.
Right. Did you have fire missions that first night, or?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So.
Oh yeah, almost every night. You're shooting H&Is, harassment and interjection.
Interdiction. Yeah. What's the purpose of that?
Suspected VC concentrations, whether the bird dog or a patrol had seen a Viet Cong patrol out someplace, or NVA, and so you would just shoot out, and hopefully there's somebody still there yet, or stop them from coming in. So you would shoot. Each gun was assigned, and whether you shoot 2 rounds, 3 rounds, if there was a forward observer out there, and if he noticed some action during the day, and all of a sudden there was more action, then they would plan, and it wouldn't be like 9 o'clock at night, or, well, at 10 o'clock we're going to shoot. It'd be some weird, at 11:37 we're going to shoot 3 rounds, or it was at 2:18 in the morning. I mean, so you just never knew. And then if you get a fire mission in between there, then you're up. So it was not at all uncommon for us to go a couple days without sleep.
Okay. Now, when you join the unit, what area are you operating in?
I believe then I was around Quan Loy, out by the Black Virgin Mountain, Tay Ninh, Quan Loy.
So you're kind of to north and a little bit maybe west of Saigon?
40, 50 miles north of Saigon.
Okay. About how far from the Cambodian border do you think you were?
We were east of the border, probably about the same, 40, 50, 60 miles.
Okay. All right. And what kind of activity was going on, or what sort of enemy presence was there?
Our job was to, amongst different specific operations, our job was to kind of keep the supply line on Highway 1, Thunder Road, Highway 13, Ho Chi Minh Trail. It has many names. But our job with for quite a while we were attached to the Special Forces guys, or they attached to us. Our battery commander, Captain Pierpoint, wanted to skip major and go right to lieutenant colonel. And so he volunteered us to be their main gun support. So wherever those folks went looking for trouble, and they usually found it, that was our job, and they would attack supply routes, or they had to go get some NVA person or whatever, and try to get some prisoners. And so a lot of times they would fly into us and then go out into the field for a couple days, or they would be dropped off out in the field and then come into us. So I've got pictures of an A team or a B team marching off into the, they would follow our night patrols out, ambush patrols out, and then once they get into the jungle, I mean, it looks like, holy cow, look at all these guys going out there, you know. They would break off and go on their mission. But if there was people watching, Viet Cong watching, it's just one group going out. Mm-hmm. And so you got to be careful, because you really didn't know a lot of times who was where.
Okay.
And so if we got hit, you just kind of spray and pray out there, and hopefully you don't hit your own folks, you know.
All right. Now, you're talking about patrols going out, so would you have infantry that were with you that would be going out, or?
Yeah. When we got our, once we get rid of the Toads, in April of '67, they gave us M109s, or 155 propelled howitzers, self-propelled. They're now called the Paladin, and they're GPS oriented. But anyways, we had the cab with us, the quarter cab, and they would go out on ambush patrol. When we had the towed howitzers, the commo section or the ammo group, you know, those guys would go out on a patrol. It's more of a listening post, an LP.
Okay. So you're not, so you basically, so the people who were part of the artillery unit
Would
were
go
actually
out.
going out doing
Yeah.
small patrols as opposed to the larger missions.
Yeah,
that-
the cab. Sometimes the cab would go out with a 8-man patrol, 10-man, 12-man, depending on what kind of ambush it was and how much activity there was in the area as to how many men went. And they would let us volunteer to go with them, just to get us off the guns so we could get some sleep, because ambush patrol, they get more sleep than we do. So it was an experience. The cab guys couldn't figure out why we wanted to go on ambush, you know, because they thought we had it made. And, you know, tell them, how much sleep do you get, you know? So.
Okay. So we're looking at your year in Vietnam. So you have about a 4-month period when you got the towed 155 howitzers. And so at that point, is this before you start supporting the Special Forces, or do the Special Forces connect with you while you still have those?
The Special Forces guys, we got connected with them with the self-propelled howitzers.
Okay, okay.
So, yeah.
So initially you're supporting most regular line infantry units
Correct.
that are out kind of patrolling. Okay. And then do they get, during that first 4 months there, do they get involved in any kind of large operations or sweeps that?
Yeah, we got, just before we got our self-propelleds, they were danger close, and so they wanted one gun to fire. So they called on us, our base piece, and we fired 120 continuous rounds just as fast as we could fire them once we had zeroed in on them. And that was quite a mission. 120 rounds, you're hustling. And so that's when I got my first Army Combat / Army ACM, it's called, Army Commendation Medal.
Right.
One of the brigadier generals came to our gun club, or our gun camp battery, and each one of the guys in the gun section got one. So all 6 of us got a.
So why were they using just one gun?
Because of the area that they were in. If you got, remember the bursting radius?
Yeah.
So we were danger close, or they wanted the rounds danger close. So if you get 6 guns firing, now you're, you know, there's
That's a bigger area that you're blanketing.
So one gun is what they wanted, and so they would give us the corrections, either bring it in, left, right, you know, out, back. So, but we just keep firing. Once we were on, keep them coming. So apparently we had a bunch of them in the open or something, and so that was probably one of the hardest missions that we had to do.
Okay. Now with the towed guns, do you have trucks that would pull them, or tracked vehicles, or?
The deuce-and-a-half Army trucks.
Okay. And then how easy or hard was it to move around with those? Was there a decent road network there?
No. Gravel roads, from what we could tell, it was the Corps of Engineers, combat engineers. A lot of times the minesweepers would go out ahead of us because of the landmines, and now they call them IEDs or something. So, but they'd sometimes put a tank out in front of us on a convoy, and if the landmines weren't large enough to take out a tank, that's fine, but they'd take out our deuce-and-a-halves and stuff like that, so armored personnel carriers. But then when we got the self-propelleds, now you got to remember, we're only 27 tons as opposed to 60-ton tank. So with 2 inches of aluminum armor, it opened us up like a sardine can. So we had 2 layers of sandbags on the floor. And we'd alternate, Jerry Putman and I would alternate being the driver, because if one driver all the time, well, chances of him getting killed. So we alternated. So if you're not driving, then you're the machine gunner on top. So that 50 became my deuce, and I became real good friends.
Okay. Now, when you have the towed guns in that period, you're not maybe as close to the Cambodian border as you would be later. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, did you normally have any infantry that stayed with you, or do you provide your own security?
That was the 2nd Infantry. There was a unit called Light Horse, which was a mortar platoon. They were with us. But when you get attacked from the rear, the mortars aren't much good up close. So then they sent us a couple of armored personnel carriers, and then they gave us a couple of Jeeps with M60s on them. So we were just kind of a whatever our commander could grab.
Right.
You know, and we spent most of our time up around the Michelin rubber tree plantations, along the Cambodian border, keeping that open, trying to because we owned it during the day, and the Viet Cong and NVA owned it at night. And so we had a lot of fire missions all along there, and at that point with the towed vehicles, we didn't have any need to go into Cambodia, so to speak.
Yeah, so you were, but now while you were with the towed vehicles, and would your camps get attacked at night?
Oh yeah, yeah. We did have concertina wire. You would put you would put claymores out. Guys would hang stuff on the wire, you know, empty pop cans with stones in them, or you know, stuff like that. So. We put out an LP would go out listening post, and then we'd put other guys way out, and there's other stories that when we got our self-propelleds, other things that we had done with the CAF. But yeah, with the towed vehicles, and then you got to remember too that when you have to really swing guns around, you got to lift those spades up and then twist the gun and then relay it again. So you got to run these flashlights out, and so that the gunner can line the sights up on the 2 flashlights. Well, I was running the back one out, and there was some concertina wire back there that I had forgotten about, and I got tangled up in it, you know, and the flashlight goes flying, and that's how I got all these scars on my face, and so they literally had to cut me. The more I thrashed around, the more I got tangled up in it. So you're of course, you're sweating, the adrenaline, it's hot, it's at night, and they were cutting me out of it because I'm just full of blood. They thought I got hit by something. And so they cut me out of it, and the medic, he's wiping me off, and he says, "Ah, Jesus, Jamie," he says, "you know, you just got puncture wounds, get out, you know, no big deal." So.
Now, so again, well, in that first phase there, whether you're still with the towed unit, I mean, did you face any serious attacks, or just straight sniper fire, or mortars?
Oh yeah, we would have mortars, rockets come in. They would come in danger close, where you would actually have to open up with a M60. Guys would come up and lay between the guns, and it's usually we were firing over a ravine, so you could see the flashes from the mortars, and then you could hear the thump, you know, and then you could see the rocket taking off, and so you duck, you know. And I'm not one much to duck. I'd go for the gun. So.
Okay, but would they make any ground attacks? Would you get people trying to infiltrate the wire and getting through?
Yeah, we never had anybody with the towed vehicles come in that close, which is good for me because it acclimated me into Vietnam. Your body has to get acclimated to the humidity and the heat in the monsoon seasons, and so. Of course, you're spitting tacks because, you know, what the hell, we just get here, we got to fill all these dams. You know, with the towed vehicles, the howitzers, you have to fill a lot of sandbags. And then when you get marching orders to move out, you can't leave them sandbags. So somebody else would come in and pick them up, or they'd say, just take a machete and slice them up. And some of the stuff, flashlight batteries was one of them. We'd change flashlight batteries and just throw them away. Well, come to find out, flashlight batteries, the Viet Cong would pick them up and then solder them together and then use it, because in the sunlight they would recharge a little bit, enough to ignite a landmine or a booby trap. So we had to take a machete or a knife and cut the batteries up so they couldn't be used. I mean, and the brass, sometimes with the 105 guys, they would leave their brass. Well, they would take that brass and cut it up and use it for shrapnel. So.
Yeah. So every time you move, you've got to police the area and clean everything up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. And now you then make a switch over. I guess now while you were again with the towed unit and you're kind of more in the middle of the country, were there a lot of civilians around?
Yes. Sometimes you're set up alongside a road. Sometimes you're out adjacent to the rice paddies. You could generally tell if you were going to be hit at night because the civilians, there wouldn't be any. They'd be gone. And then usually during the day, is okay, it's going to be a good night. We're not going to get hit tonight because the civilians and their oxes, you know, and their water buffaloes. But if you didn't see anybody, you know you're going to get hit.
Okay. Now, did the civilians make any effort to interact with you, either sell you things or anything else like that?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, pineapples. It got to the point where they would inject pineapples with formaldehyde or battery acid. Try to sell you beer, the Tiger 33 beer, because we didn't have any ice. You had to drink it warm. But what we ended up having to do is take the beer bottle and tip it upside down and then watch the glass go to the neck before you bought it, because what they would do is pop the top on it and then take a clear, like, I'm just gonna use like a mayonnaise jar because it's clear glass, and pulverize it to a powder and pour that in your Coca-Cola or your whatever, and then you would think it's sand. God, oh, I'm so thirsty, you know. And what you do is you're drinking that glass and it gets into your intestines, and then it lacerates your intestines and your bowel and all that kind of stuff. So now you got to get out of the field. So we learned that real quick. And eating pineapples, and you just didn't buy any. They'd give you sugar cane. You'd buy short stocks of sugar cane that had glass in it. And of course, you're chewing on it and you're thinking, God, it's sand. Well, we learned otherwise. So now we can't. We couldn't buy anything from anybody.
And was there other kinds of stuff available? I mean, would prostitutes try to approach a unit?
Oh, yeah. That was $5, you know. Yeah, GI number one, girl in GI number one. No, you're number 10. No, $5. And you try to Jew them down, and once the battery commander found out about them coming in, then of course that stopped real quick. But we had a few guys that caught VD. Thankfully, you know, that's not worth it for me. Right. But yeah, we'd have a barber come in, cut your hair, and you'd stand there with a rifle, Well, he cut your buddy's hair, and I got a picture of Tom Novicus getting his hair cut, and then it was my turn, so I'd give him the rifle, and then he'd stand there and watch him, because they use these hand clippers, and then they take a razor to trim around, and they didn't want you to slit your neck, throat, so you'd make sure that he didn't do that. And
Yeah. And was this a period where they were also selling drugs and that sort of thing?
they tried to sell us drugs. You could get a bag of marijuana about that big around, about that tall, for $1.50. And I was talking this with another fella yesterday on the radio. On these TV shows, I don't know where they get that from. This guy I was talking to was a colonel, and he was you know who he is, but he was a battery commander or company commander, and he was a brigade commander, and with the big red one. And we never saw that. We weren't allowed to smoke it in the first place. Mm-hmm. But you had to be on your toes. I mean, you had to be alert 100% of the time. And you had to depend on your partner, your buddy, and other guys in the gun crew. I mean, if they needed help, you went over there and helped them. Mm-hmm. If our gun wasn't picked for the fire mission, then you helped them. I mean, that was, so you had to be alert, you had to be in touch of all of your faculties.
Yeah. And it's pretty consistent, and even in periods when drug use got a lot worse, the units that were actually out in the field, and you're out in the field, you're not in some big base camp.
Right.
There you had relatively low amounts of that sort of thing, and not when anybody needed to be on. So
right.
Anyway, but I kind of ask these questions in part because they're part of the stereotypes and so forth. We want to know, well, okay, well, do you see that or not see that,
yeah.
and so forth. Okay, so are there other things that happened while you were with the towed unit, or other impressions from that period that kind of stand out in your mind?
Yeah, when you'd move into an area, we would try to have the combat engineers go in, because you don't know what you're moving into, because you got to lay these guns. And sometimes there'd be a 105 unit with us. Sometimes the 8-inchers would be with us, or the 175s, the long toms. So you had to be real careful of what you're moving into. One time we moved into an area that was a Viet Cong base camp. And so we set the guns all up, and we're in a fire mission, and our right spade fell through a tunnel. And the spade broke through the tunnel. And unbeknownst to us, you know, and the gun tipped over, and we, oh my God. So of course now everybody's grabbing their rifle. They ceased the fire mission. They sent the infantry out, the tunnel rats, you know, just maybe 40, 50 yards away, there's a tunnel right there that was missed. So now the tunnel rats are going in there with their flashlights and their 45s, and you'd hear a thunk, you know. There was actually VC in the tunnels yet. So that was one of the more hair-raising, you know, a howitzer tips over. I mean, you know, we broke through the tunnel. We were right on top of them after we'd blown it. You know, that's kind of what you did. You just blow the hell out of an area and then move in there. Yep. Well, they got missed.
But if they're underground, then they may still be there.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Now you make the switch over now, and you start, and now you get self-propelled guns. Now they're on, you have tracked vehicles with the guns mounted on them, and you can kind of drive around more. And initially, did the battery, when you first started supporting the Special Forces, was the battery kind of on its own?
Yeah, we were here again, you got to remember who our battery commander was, Captain Pierpoint, who through ranks, this is a, I don't want to say a pilot program, because I don't know how long it had been going on, whether they were using the guns, other units, but he volunteered us to do this one. So it was probably 3 months. And so we would go on what they call S&Ds, search and destroy, recon missions where you just go through a village, and sometimes they're 85% VC sympathizers, or maybe they're on our side sympathizing. You could pretty much tell if they were a VC sympathizer, you would see males, guys, boys around. if they were sympathizers for the United States, there wouldn't be any males around because the VC would either kill them or draft them into their, so there'd just be a bunch of women around. So you learn these little things. But yeah, when you're going through with the self-propelleds, and then they put the cab with us because we were getting hit from the rear a lot.
Okay, and you refer to them as the quarter cavs. It's
The quarter cav.
1st Battalion, 4th Cavalry Regiment,
Yep.
but an armored cavalry unit. So
Armored Cavalry Unit.
So they have
Yep.
tanks and armored personnel carriers.
Yep. And yeah, you don't mess with those boys. We have them. They shoot first, ask questions later. We liked them. We didn't have to pull any night guard. They did everything. They would lead the convoy. Yeah, we got in trouble on a convoy. Captain Pierpoint was leading the convoy in a Jeep, and he was shooting monkeys with his personal, we could carry personal sidearms then, shooting at monkeys with a .38 special, snub nose. And so when you hear that, you recon by fire. So this one shoots this way, and every, you know. So the command and control chopper had a colonel in it up above, overseeing the convoy. And so he stopped the convoy, wanted to know what the hell was going on. And of course, everybody opened up. You know, the cab opens up with the 60s and the 50s, and we opened up with the 50s and so on. And come to find out, he was just shooting at monkeys as we're going. And
I take it he only did that once?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He was. He got his butt reamed right in front of us. So I got pictures of the chopper landing because we're like the second vehicle back, and but we had no clue what was going on. I mean.
All right. Now, was there a period there where you were operating with Special Forces before you had the cav attached to you?
Yeah, that's why we got the cav. We had a mortar platoon and some infantry guys, but when you're shooting support for the Special Forces guys, then the Viet Cong surmised that if we take a small contingency and attack the howitzer unit from the back, they'd have to swing tubes around to protect themselves. So that would draw the fire away from the Green Berets, and then they figured that then they could get the Green Berets. Well, sometimes we were in Cambodia and sometimes we weren't, but try to find another artillery unit that would relieve us takes time. And then they got to get acclimated to shooting over there too. So in the meantime, we've got a firefight going behind us because we can't swing tubes around. So you take your M60 or whatever and your thump gun and you'd go help the infantry out. And then now that's reducing the amount of folks we have to run our guns. So somebody, apparently Captain Pierpoint, got the idea that maybe we should have a cav unit, something that's mobile.
All right. Now you got involved at times in actually using machine guns and so forth to defend your position with them. You've got some pictures that we were looking at before the session started. Can you talk about that incident and what happened there?
Well, we had been hit several times, as you saw in the pictures. So the rockets and mortars started coming in, and the guys were going towards the mortar holes. Well, I was pretty cocky back, well, I still am, but I wasn't going to die in a mortar hole. So I ran towards the gun, and I got into the gun and I was loading it up. And in ours, you can, the turret on the 50 goes all the way around, and then the hatch cover flops up, and you can put the gun on either side of the hatch cover. And so, since I'm right-handed, I had the hatch on this side to the left of the gun in case they're shooting at me. So I went in there, and each gun carries 1,500 rounds of 50 cal. So I was splicing, you take a cartridge out and put the next link in there and put it in. So I was hooking up a couple of machine gun belts. And then I took it to the top. Well, then here comes Sergeant Morgan, our staff sergeant. He's just what blanket blank are you doing? I said, I'm not dying in a foxhole. So he says, I'll feed you. So he's linking belts together while I'm firing, and I'm strafing that jungle that you saw there. And the bodies are coming, because there's no concertina wire. We pulled our listening post in, so they're coming in and we're spraying. Well, once I started firing, then other guys went to the 50s, and they were close where you couldn't drop tubes down and shoot. So now we've got M60s going, we got thump guns going. Gun personnel are now infantry. And so I fired all 1,500 rounds of my 50, burnt the barrel up, changed barrels out, and got sick as a goat. You saw the thing that this was part of my PTSD, the nightmares and flashbacks, and through counseling and other things that I've done, I can talk about it. Humans, animals, period, are not designed to kill their own. If you look at two rams battering their heads, and then two deer, two bucks fighting, they don't kill each other. They just wear each other out, and the strongest survives. Humans are the same way. We are not designed to kill our species. So when you do that, in my case, I got sick. I mean, over the side of the gun.
And did that happen at night at the time of the fight, or was it the next
right.
day?
The minute I saw that body, and the adrenaline is going, and you're shooting, and here I am, I'm still shooting, see that part of it. I puked all over the side of the gun and whatnot, and then daylight came, and you see the carnage out there. Now this is field artillery. According to the psychiatrist that I have talked to, that I'm not supposed to see that because I'm artillery. You know, you put guys' intestines in because they got hit by shrapnel, so they're laying there, and you put it in, and but anyways, Captain Pierpoint came over and asked me if I had hit anything, and I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. And so you could see the puke on the side of the gun, and he says, well, when you calm down, he said, clean the gun up, pick up your brass, you know. But he was so anyways, that's where I got my first Bronze Star.
Right. And that was when one of the pictures you have shows this big swatch of cloth that someone's holding up, and there's a bunch of rows, parallel lines of bullet holes, and that was from one of these guys that you hit.
Yes.
Can you explain what that was, or what the cloth was?
The Viet Cong and NVA have, you know, Viet Cong don't, but they wear like a cummerbund, a sash. And they normally carried 2 or 3 days of rice, and then this sauce called numyuk or something like that, and it stinks. It's just fish, ground up fish, and it stinks. And then they carry water, and then on the back of the cummerbund they have like a poncho liner, about the same size. And it's something that they wrap up in when they sleep in, and it's folded all up and folded in half, and the cummerbund sash holds it on their back, and it comes around. Well, I had raked this guy with a 50 and literally cut him in half. And so when you went out to do the body count, here again, you say what you want about body counts, either they're inflated or deflated. They took a few of us from each gun section, and you'd go out and do a body count. And so the guys took this off, and then we picked up all the grenades and machine guns and everything that was there, and we put it on a couple of big mortar holes and took photographs of it to show what we had captured. And it's in the 1st Infantry Division yearbook, it's in there. And so, not that I'm making this stuff up, but I had a couple of the fellas open it up so I could take a picture of it. And so that's kind of the proof that I have. And other pictures were confiscated because they could be used for, you know, body counts, and you can't show them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but you basically have the cloth where you have these lines of bullets because the cloth was folded over on itself,
Yep.
and the bullet just went through the fabric multiple times and made
Yep.
that bizarre kind
Yep.
of pattern.
Yep.
Yeah, so that is something that's not what we associate with artillery units. But
Right.
one thing about Vietnam is that different people do different things at different times. And in your case, you had a battery that was pretty much on its own out in the field, and it came under enemy attack.
Yes.
But the other thing then is that one thing the Army did more of than it gets credit for is that it adjusted. So now you got some armored cavalry supporting you, and they're providing security, and they let you kind of go where you need to go.
Yeah.
All right. Now, when you had the cavalry unit with you, did the enemy make further attempts to attack you?
Oh, sure. They, at one point, the cab guys, now I don't know where they got this stuff from, but they brought in a twin 40
Which is?
off anti-aircraft, off
Yeah,
a ship.
So like 40 millimeter anti-aircraft cannons that could be
Right.
repeating fire. Yeah.
And it was a twin 40 off a ship, and they mounted it in an M48 tank
Chassis.
chassis. Okay. They brought in a quad 50,
So 50 caliber machine guns, 4 of them. Yeah.
4
Yeah.
50 cals, and so because we were getting hit so much, apparently we had pissed off somebody, and so when we get hit, they'd open up with those twin 40s and the quad 50s, and it was interesting. At night, you never knew what was going to happen. Very seldom did we get hit during the day. So, and the armament that came in to protect us was, and then there's a thing called a mad minute, and we got to go online with the twin 40 and shoot at trees out there, and that was it was a relaxing time. Just before dark, you do a mad minute.
And that when everybody fires at the same time?
Everybody fires whatever you want to bring up and shoot. And then we had a competition between the twin 40 and our 155 howitzer, shooting at a tree, a big tree out there in the jungle. And you could see when the twin 40s would hit it. But when we hit it, now you got about a 7-inch 100 round going through this tree. The tree just literally exploded. I mean, so that kind of shut the guys up on the thing. You guys can't hit that? Oh yeah.
All right.
So.
Now, what sort of impression did you have of the Special Forces people?
Respect the hell out of them. We didn't get a chance to talk to them. They were in and gone, or they're in us and gone. But they just looked like people you didn't want to mess with.
Yep.
I mean, they were probably off duty. They were the kindest people you ever want to meet. But when they came into us, either from the jungle and then going to the jungle, they didn't associate with us. They didn't. We had no idea what their mission was. They weren't there just but a few minutes. And if they were there for, say, an hour or more, they were up by the CP, the command post. So as an individual on the gun sections, we had no idea what they were doing. We had no idea what their mission was.
Now, you mentioned at times operating around the rubber plantations. Were there rules about what you could do or not do? Because those were still functioning plantations sometimes.
They had little white signs, stakes in the ground like that said, U.S. government, do not destroy rubber trees. Yeah, right. Okay, fine. And so we'd, the cab wanted to get into a particular place where they thought they might get ambushed, so they would try to get a tank in there. Well, you can't, they'd get in and then maneuver around and turn the tubes and so on. Well, if a couple of rubber trees were in the way, they'd back up, drop the tube at 90 millimeter and blow the tree right out of the ground. There, now, okay, now we're good. I mean, they didn't give a rip. I mean,
now, would the enemy use the plantations as places for cover or have bases in?
Yeah, you would normally, Rubber trees are, because the ground is kind of cleared, and it's single canopy. And so in our case, we can't be near the rubber trees because we got to be able to back off so we can shoot over them, okay? So the cab guys would get in by the rubber trees, and then we're more out in the open. So we could protect anything in the open here, but not coming out of the rubber trees, so that's where they were. And they would move their tanks and APs around every night. You know, if we're there for a week on a mission, then they would tank here tonight. Well, it'd be over there, or it'd be further in, or it'd be back out, and APCs would be over here maybe, and they're never in the same place twice.
Okay. Do they not want the enemy to mark their positions? Was that
Right, right. We one night we got rocketed, and a tank probably 40 yards behind us. 7 guys got killed. They were sleeping on and around the tank, and they took a rocket right in the turret. Never knew it was coming, and the turret came off, and that's another time that, you know, you see flashbacks. But you know, just unexpected. Just all of a sudden, here's this big explosion.
Okay. Now you're in Vietnam, basically, what, end of '66 to end of '67? Is that
right? Just before the Tet, I left.
Okay. Now, was there any kind of rhythm or pattern to the amount of activity? Were there phases? Was there some chunk of that time that was busier, or was it all pretty much the same?
Yeah. Let's see. Tet was January 31st. Yeah. Probably around October, when the buildup started. They were probing the weak spots, and pretty much every other night we'd get hit, and they were, because the supply routes were coming in, and so for the buildup for the Tet in January 31st was Tet, and I was supposed to leave the field December 9th, and we got hit December 8th. Just after midnight, and we lost 3 howitzers. I mean, they hit us hard, and that's when I got my 2nd Bronze Star. So they extended me 3 days. Only choppers in and out was for ammo and water, and we were eating MRE, or well, they're not MRE, it was K rations then. Yeah. So, Captain Palmer was our battery commander then. And he said, if you want out, you know, the only way you're going to get out of here, Jamie, is if you're the gunner on our ammo tracks then was an Amtrak, was a tracked vehicle. So I got pictures of me sitting up there. I've got to be a machine gunner on a convoy. I can't take a helicopter out of there. So I'm a machine gunner on a 50 on an ammo, going to get ammo. And that's how I got out. I was 3 days late getting home, so.
Okay. And then what did you get the Bronze Star for?
Basically killing people. I mean, you know, that's what they get medals for.
Okay, but was it working the artillery piece, or was it for
no?
Working
Well,
the machine guns, or?
It was the machine gun on the 50, and the ACM was working the artillery with the towed vehicles. So it wasn't for valor or anything. I didn't do anything that heroic. I was just doing my job, and I kind of initiated, okay, I shoot first, ask questions later. I learned that from the cab. You know, it's better to, instead of asking permission, ask for forgiveness. So what are you going to do, send me to Vietnam? I'm already here. What, give me an Article 15? At least I'm alive. So that was my whole deal.
So you basically started shooting on your own, and it turned out to be a good idea.
Yep. And the company commander the battery commander would say, you know, because I'd start where I could see and then work my way up into the trees for snipers, and then every gun has a field of fire, and I equate this when I teach my hunter safety classes that if you're hunting with people, you have a field of fire. You don't overlap some, you know. So when you lay the gun and you get in a position, myself and a couple other guys, we'd all talk about, okay, I'm going to cover from here to here. and you're going to cover overlapping from there to here. And so if we get hit, you're not going to be, you know, and then you're supposed to know where the listening posts are and stuff like that. But the battery commander says, well, what happens if we had listening posts out? I said, well, I had hoped that by the time this ruckus started that you had called them in already. And with the Cav, what Cav would do is they'd send out their LPs and then put claymores out. You did that every night, put claymores out. Well then, what they would do is, after dark, they'd call them back in. And what happened is the Viet Cong would go out there and turn the claymores around, so that if you heard a ruckus, you'd fire the claymore and you'd blow yourself up. Well, the Cav, they'd bring their listening posts back in, and then they had infrared. So they could see them out there. So they'd take the tube, and they'd get 3 or 4 of them lined up, and they'd cut loose with that 90 and blow them. Well, you know, your engagement, rules of engagement, you know, you got to be fired upon and stuff. Well, no,
Not out there.
no.
Okay.
No. So they just, you know.
Now you mentioned going into Cambodia. Do you know that your own unit actually went into Cambodia, and did you know that at the time?
We did not know it. Captain Pierpoint might have. But how we found out is that fire direction control, you know, they know where they are in order to give you deflection and quadrant.
Right.
But as being on the gun, we did not know that until afterwards. They would tell us. I mean, well, we're in Cambodia now, you know, 5 clicks, 10 clicks, half a mile, 2 miles, 5 miles. That's about as far as we ever got. But see, that's where the Green Beret guys were. And Johnson is telling everybody that there's nobody in Cambodia. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Now, you've mentioned here a couple of different battery commanders, the Captain Pierpoint and the Captain Palmer. Was there a changeover then while you were with the unit?
Yeah, there was, in '67, they split the batteries up so that when people rotated in and out of the battery, that you wouldn't have a whole battery of young people. So they split us up, but apparently when I came there, they served a year tour like I did, but their tour ended. So then we got a new battery commander, we got a new executive officer, new first sergeant, all that kind of stuff. So Captain Palmer was West Point, and Captain Pierpoint was West Point, Captain Palmer was OCS. And big difference in commanders, battery commanders. Captain Pierpoint is one of those guys where you would like to salute out in the field. He wanted to do the field inspections. He, you know, field inspection on what? I have a mess kit, a couple of canteens, a bayonet, you know, backpack, and I don't have any of that stuff. We didn't have any trenching tools. We don't have enough to have an inspection, you know. But what are you going to lay it out on? A sleeping bag? I mean.
And would he actually do this, or was it?
Oh yeah, you know.
Okay.
Clean it. Clean it with what? You know, we haven't had a shower in a week. I mean, what do you know? That dust and dirt gets in your pistol belt and your canteen cover, and you know, cleaning rifles. We're always cleaning our rifles. Oh geez. So no way to stop that either.
Well, it's not that loud, so.
Okay, I'll keep my hand.
Okay.
But so anyways, we do inspections, and what I did is the VFW would send me cans. Holy crap! Would send.
Go ahead.
You can edit this out.
Oh yeah.
They would send me cans of dry slide. There. So it's like a little can of 3-in-1 oil, and what it is liquid graphite, okay? And so it's got a long needle on it. Well, they would send me that, and I would clean my M14 with it. And when you stood inspection, the guy, all we had to clean stuff with is fuel oil. So you put your rifle in fuel oil and you clean it, and of course then the flash suppressor would rust and that sort of thing. Well, mine didn't have any rust on it. So I'm standing in inspection, and Lieutenant Eckert, who was he was ROTC, he was reserve officer.
Right.
So he'd look at my rifle and said, "Jamie, that's dirty." I said, no, sir, that's dry slide. That's what? I said, "Liquid graphite." He says, "Well, you see me after formation." Now we're out in the field. So, okay, he'd come down to the gun battery, and he said, "I want to see this dry slide." So I took out this little can, black and white can, and it says dry slide on it. So he said, "Well, I'm going to have to confiscate that." So, okay, he takes it, goes up to the CP, you know, and he's cleaning his sidearm with it and stuff. You put it on, wipe it off, and it's just slicker. And you can't wipe it, it just spreads. So here comes Captain Palmer. He says, "Well, Lieutenant Eckert was saying that you have this dry slide." I said, "Well, no, sir, he has it." "Oh, okay." So unbeknownst to them, the VFW sent me a box, and there's 6 cans in a box. So our gun section is cleaning it. So now we're inspection again, and all our weapons are all clean. And so Captain Palmer wanted to know if I had more of that, and I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, that's not authorized. I'm going to have to confiscate that." So now he has a can, Lieutenant Eckert has a can. So I'm passing stuff out. So I get another box and mail call. So they want to know if that's dry slide. I said, rattle. Open it up yet. He made me give each gun section a can of dry slide. So there went my 6 cans. So that's the kind of stuff depending on who the...
Okay. Well, you had said initially it was Pierpoint was the one that was a sticker for this stuff, but now you're mentioning Palmer.
Yeah. Captain Pierpoint would, if you had a little bit of rust on your bayonet, I mean, he would, and we had our own personal knives too that we carried, because, I mean, it's pretty hard to throw a bayonet, but we could carry our personal knives, boot knives and stuff. Some guys had throwing knives. We would practice throwing. Here to the curtain, we could throw knives. We'd put a Lucky Strike package up on a target on a bore sighting board, and most of us got real good at throwing knives. And so, but Captain Pierpoint was, polish your boots. With what?
Yeah.
Wipe the dust off them. Jungle boots. You'd wear the same boots for so long that your feet would bleed and crack, and you very seldom took your boots off. But he was a stickler. He wanted not so much clean uniforms, but boy, you better be shaven, and and if nothing else, wash your face. Right. And
now, was he good at his job? I mean, in terms of actually commanding a battery?
Yeah, he was good at that because he volunteered us for everything. Well, then we would get guests in, other commanders, you know, and so that's how he wanted to skip major and go right to lieutenant colonel.
Right.
And so we had to be sharp. I mean, blouse your pants, don't roll them up and fold them up, and yeah, it was.
So was it a relief to get Captain Palmer instead?
Yes. He ran a tight ship, but somehow we got a volleyball net and a volleyball, and so we could play volleyball. No baseball, no softball, none of that stuff, because we just didn't have the room for it. But we could put a volleyball net up and play volleyball, and we'd have a little competition between the gun sections, or if there happened to be another unit, like with the cab guys. Lieutenant Eckert must have got that, because he spiked the ball and drove a guy's 2 fingers down over their knuckles, and that guy went to Japan. Never heard from him again. So yeah, there's a big difference in commanders, and an old Apache saying, "There's many roads to the same." I guess that's Apache. I don't know. I heard that someplace, but you can, yeah. So Captain Palmer got just as much work and stuff out of us, but not the animosity. I mean, if we we could have saluted Pure Point in the field. We threatened to do it because you don't wear rank. Nobody wore rank. And Captain Pure Point didn't even like to have a radio man follow him around, because that means that you're a person of interest, you know, of command if you have a radio man. So a lot of times he'd leave the radio man back at the CP and he'd just walk around like, but he strutted. He was tall and skinny, and you just wanted to throw him a salute, you know, when you're out in the boonies. But, you know, Sergeant Morgan would say, don't you even think about it, you know.
All right, so he fits at least some part of the West Point stereotype at that point.
Yep.
Fortunately, they didn't all, but.
Oh, no, because Colonel Gillum, that we both know, he's a West Pointer, and he's a great guy. I mean, he is super.
And he's somebody who learned from the people around him and understood when he came in, he didn't know everything.
Yeah. Yeah, he was one, okay, I'm the platoon leader, but I don't know squat, so you continue running the platoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Captain Palmer was like that. He would let the first sergeant run, or the XO, if the XO was here before he was, you know. So he would just wander around, and Captain Palmer would take his, well, you saw him, he had his T-shirt on, and the first sergeant had his blouse on or his jungle shirt on, but you'd never know Captain Palmer was a captain. I mean, he was, you know, didn't wear a cover, didn't wear a hat most of the time.
Okay, say a little bit more about just living conditions in the field. On a day-to-day basis, you're with the battery, you know, not a big thing happening. What's going on? What are you doing?
We had, they gave us tents for a while, these little umbrella-type tents, and you'd sandbags around them. Here again, military not thinking, howitzers have concussion. Concussion blows things apart. So the tents didn't last very long. Either the mortars would blow them apart, rockets, or the concussion of our guns was always ripping them. Wouldn't blow them down, but just ripping them. And so they took those away from us. And then we ended up living in bomb craters or shell craters. You'd kind of flatten them out, and then we carried PSP or PSP. It's what they build runways out of.
Yeah, steel matting, yeah.
And so we carried that on trucks. And what we would do is drive steel fence posts in the ground and lay that stuff on the roof, and then put a tarp over it, and then 2 layers of sandbags. And then we had a cot, and then you put your cot in there. And then that's where you slept. So now you've got to contend with snakes and scorpions and all that stuff, because it's a shady spot. And you didn't like taking your boots off because scorpions would go in your boots, and sometimes people would forget to empty them out. But that's how we lived whenever we were out in the field. One fella didn't want to do that. He just put 2 sandbags around him, and he got stung by a scorpion on his testicle. And so his swelled, I kid you not, they were black and this big, and they put him in a chopper and flew him off to Japan. Never saw him again. Don't know if he lived or died. But yeah, if you're not looking out for Viet Cong, you're looking out for bamboo vipers, or we call them a 2-step. Scorpions, snakes, cobras, king cobras. The cobras you try to capture, and then the medic would milk them and then use that for snake venom. He'd send it to the hospital on a helicopter, and they'd make snake venom out of it. Or, you know,
Antivenom, yeah, serum. Yeah. Let's see, now, were there rats out in the field?
Not with us. We weren't in one place long enough for the rats to find out we were there.
All right.
Here again, we talk to folks that are in a base camp where there's rats in the guard stations and Connex buildings and all that kind of. No, we never encountered rats. That was.
All right. And what were you eating?
If we were long enough in a place, they would bring a mess hall out.
Okay.
So we did eat pretty good. A lot of times they would fly us out meals in those thermal
Yeah, Marmite cans.
Marmite cans, and so, or if it's monsoon season, they had Chinook or Huey's would fly out food for us. And if we're only going to be in a place a day, day and a half, then we would eat the K rations and stuff like that. So, or if you're on convoy, you ate K rations.
All right. And then where did you get your fresh water from?
They would fly it out. You'd get a Lister bag or a water trailer. They'd bring it out in a bring it out in a water trailer, a 200-gallon trailer. You know, it's a trailer, and it looked like a sprinkler sometimes. So you're finding sticks to poke in the holes so the water doesn't, you know, snipers shooting up at them as they're bringing it in. Oh, jeez. Oops, lost
Just
my
a
mic.
popular man there. All right.
My wife. Sorry about that, guys.
That's okay.
No worries. I get it.
All right, that should be good.
Okay.
I gotta say.
So, geez, oh Pete, she's gonna bug me. Hello. Hi.
But don't bother. We'll just edit it
Oh,
out.
I'm still in it. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I was supposed to be here till about 12:30.
okay. Very good. Yep. Bye bye. How was your meeting?
Oh yeah.
I said it's a 2-hour meeting.
Yeah.
So, anyways.
Okay. So we were talking about and so people would shoot up the water containers and so forth.
Yeah,
Now, and you hear stories about sort of how bad the water tasted. Would you put things in it to make it taste better?
Yeah, iodized tablets. This is another thing where if you're talking to a psychiatrist and you're trying to get your PTSD and all this kind of stuff, is that sometimes you'd come to a stream and you'd think it's fresh water. So you'd put your canteen in there and put in iodized tablets and drink it. Well, unbeknownst to the medics and the doctors, or a lot of people, that Agent Orange had been sprayed, and it's in the water. So you're drinking Agent Orange now, okay? It's just not only in the trees, but it's also in the water. Or if you come to a pond and and get some fresh water. I had prostate cancer at the age 56, which is real young for prostate cancer. And they took 12 biopsies, 8 were positive. And the government admitted that it was from Agent Orange. And we were in Agent Orange. I
Yep.
mean, they sprayed that whole area where we were in several times. So, but they never thought about the water, apparently. You could drink that stuff, let alone just being on the foliage.
Yep.
Yeah.
Foliage,
And
yeah.
So,
But then when you got the stuff out of the water tanks or the bags and things like that, did that have a bad taste to it? Or
yeah, it tasted, sometimes they put it in a Lister bag and brought it out, and it tasted like canvas, you know, like drinking water out of a garden hose.
Yep.
Don't know where they got their potable water from. Who knows what chemicals they put in it. Some of the problems we had too is that the indigenous people would sell ice. We could buy ice, okay? So we had no ice. So we would get Cokes or Pops, and you'd lay it on that ice and spin it. Well, what you do is take your canteen cup and knock off a chunk of ice and put it in your canteen cup and pour Coke over it, so you drink it. Well, here again, unbeknownst to us, they had put glass
Yep.
in that ice. So now you're drinking it and you're chewing on that ice, crunch, crunch, crunch. Oh God, you know, I'm just saying it. Well, now you're eating glass again. So it got to the point where you could buy ice, but don't just put your can on it and spin it, and to get it cool.
Right.
You never get it cold, but you get it cool, and drink your pop. So that's, I mean, they was always trying to poison you somehow.
all
You
right.
know, and there's razor blades and booby traps and.
Okay. Now, did you spend any time out of the field?
Geez, I say in the field 11 and a half months because I went to Hawaii for R&R
Okay.
for a week. And then you get to if we're in a sympathetic towards us town where you could get a half a day pass, where you'd jump on a chopper and they'd take you in, drop you off, and then at dusk you had to get back on the chopper because at night that town belonged to the Viet Cong. So you could do that once in a while, and that's the only time that I ever. If you went to a base camp, like on an ammo run, they would put ammo guys on your gun, and then you would go in on an ammo truck, and you had a list for the guys. You wanted stamps, writing paper, if you could get batteries for your radio or shaving or whatever. You had a big list. And so here again, I got in trouble there for steel pot, flak vest, personal sidearm. My pants were rolled up, flak vest on. I mean, just in a base camp, you don't carry weapons and that kind of stuff. So I was smoking a cigar, rifle slung on my right shoulder, and me and another fella, Larry Martin, walking into the PX, and a warrant officer and a lieutenant came walking by us, and they probably went 8-10 feet, and they stopped and yelled at us, "Hey trooper, don't you know how to salute?" Oh, so we turned around and I saluted with my left hand with a cigar in my mouth. That's a no-no, And of course, there's no rank, no names, no nothing on here. And what are you doing with those arms and blah, blah. I mean, they just gave us a rep. And we weren't even standing at attention. And so they wanted to know what unit we were with. And he says, "Oh, you those guys up north?" "Yes, sir." "Get out of here," they said. So apparently our reputation preceded us. They knew. So that was, I thought, oh boy, here we go. A bunch of snobs, rear echelon people, They might have been pilots for all I know. But,
Pilots probably wouldn't have done that.
no, one was a warrant officer and one was a lieutenant.
Well, it could have been,
so,
yeah.
But because, I got a cigar in my mouth and the hell with them, So, but, and I was probably older than they were. I turned 21 in Vietnam, so they called me Pappy.
Right.
But,
Now, one of the other stereotypes about Vietnam is issues with race and so forth. I mean, what was the ethnic mix of your battery? Did you have black guys there, Hispanics?
yeah. Guadalupe Tobias was, he was in our gun battery, and him and I got along, poking fun at each other all the time. Washington. George Alexander, he had about 5 presidents' names after his last name was Washington. And we made fun of him. I got a picture of him where if he wasn't smiling, you wouldn't see him. It was a black and white picture, and George Washington. And we had a good time. We had quite a few blacks, Hispanics in our outfit. And we had a couple blacks in our gun battery, and we had a ball. And here again, it's trust. It's, and we associated with them. They didn't do their black thing and white thing. I mean, it was, like on Full Metal, not so much Full Metal Jacket, but.
Yeah, but it is, it's again, it is the stereotype or the assumption, and there were times and places where there were racial issues, but usually in base camps or rear areas, and more often later in the war than when you were there.
Yeah, maybe in the 70s when they were dialing down, but no, we didn't see any of that. Even with the cab guys, nobody really even hardly smoked because you didn't have cigarettes a lot. When you did get a care package, I didn't smoke. I liked to chew on a cigar. Well, I had a pipe, but that got blown up. My Uncle Bill sent me a pipe, and that got blown up, and my writing material, everything, my radio, everything got blown up. Yeah, that was the other thing. If you had a record player or a transistor radio, if it lasted a month, because the concussions of the gun would blow the speakers all apart, So it was just pretty quiet out there.
All right. Now, did you get hurt yourself?
I broke my shoulder. I fell in a ditch and broke my right shoulder. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know it was broke. They
Okay.
just tied it to and put me on light duty until I could move it. But I found out it was broke when they did. I had elbow surgery on it a few years back. I had bone on this side, and that was because this didn't heal. But they showed me right on the X-ray, right where I broke it, and they had to grind all the scar tissue off. He said, "Well, you must have broke this years ago," and I said, "Well, it had to have been in Vietnam."
Yeah.
So, but that's minor stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But,
And then did your ears get affected?
I got caught under the muzzle of the 155, the self-propelled, in a fire mission, and that blew my eardrums out. And here again, it ripped the shirts. Myself and another guy, actually it was Larry Martin, we were getting ammo and running it because we were shooting over the back of the gun. So turn tubes around and shooting over the back of the gun. And so the ammo was there. So we'd run around, grab it, and then throw it in the door, and then run around to the front of the gun, and then it's ammo. So we'd run around, you know, and then we got caught.
Okay.
Boom!
So somebody pulled the lanyard at the wrong time.
Well, that was the right time for them and the wrong time for us.
Okay.
We got caught, and the tube was almost perfectly flat. So instead of being up like this, the tube was like this. Of course, we're maybe 4 feet from the end of the gun, and that muzzle blast goes this way, but it also goes like that. And it just ripped. It's like hitting yourself in the back as hard as you can. It just ripped our shirt, and it just basically knocked us out. And they drug us out of there. And medic came over and wiped the blood off. And so, you know, it's like you. I could sit there and watch it. I could see your mouth move, but I couldn't hear anything
Right.
until it grew back. So it's.
Okay. Now, as you got toward the end of your tour, as you got short, did either your duties change or your own attitude change at all?
You just get more conscious. You try to do things that won't get you hurt. In our unit, they did not send you out of the field. Some units, if you had 30 days left, they sent you back. Our unit, you went full bore until, like I told you, I was supposed to leave December 9th. December the 8th, we got hit.
Yep.
And it didn't matter. You know, you ain't going anywhere until it's your time. So nothing changed. It was just day after day after day. But consciously yourself, you start thinking, okay, now you're just more and more, instead of just doing it automatically, you have more of a tendency to stop and think about it. Okay, now what happens, you know, well, okay, it's getting dark. Okay, now, well, boy, okay, where's the most likely spot? Usually you just wait for it to happen. So now you think, well, okay, last night we got hit from over there, and they won't do that again. You know, you're you're overly conscious. And sometimes that's not good either, because then you're not thinking about, well, you
Or
know,
you're thinking too much.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, how much contact did you have with people back home while you were in Vietnam?
Just letters. I went to Hawaii for R&R, and I called my. I had gotten, like a lot of guys, I got a Dear John while I was there, and so I went with this other girl in high school. We ended up getting married. My high school sweetheart. She just called me, and so I called her from Hawaii, and instead of my ex-girlfriend, and we chit-chatted. But then we started writing letters, and but other than that, I had no contact. I couldn't call home like the folks can now.
Yeah. Well, did your parents send you things? I mean.
Yes, Mom, of course, you know, the baked goods, but Kool-Aid and Jiffy Pop popcorn were the big things. I would get Jiffy Pop popcorn, and you take some C4 and throw it in a cup, a canteen cup, or if you could get a can, and pop the Jiffy Pop. Okay, well, the XO came down, and he says, you know, what are you doing? I said, popping popcorn. Well, don't you know we're on light restriction, noise restrictions? You know, they can smell that popcorn. I says, yeah. He says, well, you know, you're giving our position away. And I said, LT, I says, 6 howitzers, 4 tanks, 4 or 5 armored personnel carriers, all this vehicles here. You don't think that they know we're here? I mean, you know, that all these, this popcorn isn't going to make squats difference. Give me some of that. So he takes a handful and walks away. But Mom was sending me 6 Jiffy Pop popcorns in a box.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd give one to the CO, and so I could get away with being really mouthy
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, and Kool-Aid, the guys like Kool-Aid would put it in our water.
Right.
So
Yeah, that kind of thing. All right. Are there other particular memories or impressions from the Vietnam tour that you haven't brought into the story here yet that you want to add?
Other than the fact that the camaraderie was great, certain officers were like enlisted folks.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of good time there, a lot of fun. Sometimes you're scared crap out of you, but to say I was glad I did it, I would do it again if, you know. I feel sorry for the folks that are in Afghanistan who volunteer to go there and don't have the respect of the people that are there, like we didn't have the respect in Vietnam. But rules of engagement are different there. We had rules of engagement that we didn't necessarily abide by all the time. But we wouldn't get in trouble like they would now. It's more of a political scuffle.
Yep.
And I call it a scuffle because it's not a war. We didn't declare war since World War II. I talked to the Vietnam folks, and some of the state representatives and that I have talked through LZ, Michigan and stuff that I've talked with, asked them why do we not declare war. And I ask this because does it change the benefits? If you declare war on somebody, would it change the benefits that the servicemen get, even though they call it a conflict? And it's a war basically, but it's not a war. So what's the change in benefits maybe? And is that political and stuff like that? So it's and then of course the way you're treated when you get back. They put me in the riots in '68 when I got back.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into that because I'm trying to kind of close out. Sort of, there's a part where you're actually in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And you mentioned to get out of the field, you basically had to go out in a convoy rather than a helicopter.
Right.
Now, once you're out of the field, how do they get you back home?
I was in a base camp at Zion, and then now it's spit and polish time. So you've got to be shaved, haircut, clean pressed clothes, and you have to make the rounds. If you're going to ETS out, you've got to go to the chaplain, and I've never been to the chaplain, but you got to go there, and you have a card. He's got to sign it. You got to go to the PX in case you owe him some money. They got to sign it. You go to the NCO club, and they have to sign off. You got to go to the doctor, and they give you a physical, and they signed it. And there is where I run into another problem, is that, of course, my eardrums were blown out. That's not on my record. They flew me in from the field into Pleiku, pulled a tooth, never put it on my record. So that's not on my record. So now when I get home, I got to go to the dentist. I got to get a bridge made. Well, it's not on your record. Well, I'm sorry, but they put me on a helicopter, and Norm Chapin, who is a family friend of ours, was the adjutant at Pleiku. And so I went in and talked with him because he's a friend of my dad's and blah, 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 blah. But they pulled my tooth, and I got back to the helicopter, and the blades were still going around yet. So that's how long it took. Give me a shot, pull the tooth, and I really didn't get numb yet until I got to the field. So I mean, record keeping was terrible.
Yeah. All right. But anyway, so you're making you're at Zeon, the main division's main base, and you're getting processed.
Yep.
Okay. And then what happens after that?
You have to turn in your equipment. This is another farce. They have a checklist: pistol belt, canteen, helmet liner, weapons, poncho liner, and sleeping bag, and cot, and all this stuff. Cot, hell, that's out in the field yet. My sleep bag, that's out in the field yet. Well, where is it? Well, it's out in the field. Call the battery commander, have him ship it. Call the first sergeant. Well, you got to turn this stuff in. Bayonet, sheath. I mean, are you kidding me? Then I had an M16 supposedly. Well, where's your rifle? Well, combat loss. What do you mean combat loss? Well, it got blown up or it got thrown in the swamp. Well, what'd you use? Well, I had a 12-gauge shotgun. Well, where's that? Well, it's in the field. I left it with the gun section. It stays with the gun section. The battery commander didn't do any paperwork. If it's combat loss, it's wrote off as a combat loss. Well, it doesn't follow you. I mean, so.
Well, did they eventually let you go? Or did
Oh yeah. They all right. So they just signed it. It's not like I'm the first one that said that. I mean, but they've got it. It's some sergeant. He's got to give you a raft of BS and
Right.
Make it look like he's doing his job, and everybody's got their job. But don't take it out on us if you've never been to the field. I mean, it's like cleaning kits. 1 in 5 people get a cleaning kit with an M16. Well, the rear echelon people all have cleaning kits, but the people in the field that need them don't. That's how so many guys get killed, trying to fix the jams in their rifles because they don't have a cleaning kit. Yeah. So, but anyways, they basically got it out, or got me out. I flew out on another C-141 troop transport. 5 of them flew in. They unloaded the whole company of 101st Airborne. The commander, it was a colonel, a full bird, a light colonel, and a major, and I don't know what, those were the officers that flew the plane. They were turning around and going back. So they put 14 of us on this C-141, and we're flying home, okay? Big airplane, completely empty. And we sat on web seats that folded down, okay? That's where you slept too. So we're going to San Bernardino is where we're flying into. So we're flying in, well, we stopped at Okinawa to refuel. Landed, refueled, go to take off. Landing gear doesn't lock up. Lights don't come on. So we do a flyby. Yeah, your gear's up. So they put them down, bring them back up. Doesn't look like it. We're flying. He said, well, you better land, we'll check it out. Okay, so they just took on 8,000 pounds of fuel or whatever, 8,000 gallons. We're spraying it over the ocean, foaming the runway in case the landing gear doesn't lock. Oh my God. A year and 3 days in Vietnam and I'm going to die in Okinawa.
Yeah.
So we're sitting on our seats and we're strapped in and, and we land, foam all over everything, Well, it's going to be a while for us to check it out. So they put us up in a hotel in Okinawa. My first bath in a year. Of course, they're little baths, but oh my God, that felt so good. Hot water and, and the red clay just comes out of you. It looks like you're bleeding. The water is tinge of red to it. Get back on the plane. It was a couple of sensors, one on the landing gear and then the light. Couple faulty switches and stuff. So we take off. We land at San Bernardino. What the hell am I doing in San Bernardino? And I got to be way up here in California. So the Red Cross gets me a flight free up to Travis Air Force Base. So now I'm held up there 12 hours. Why? Well, this is December. It's 7 below in Michigan. All I have on is my summer khakis, no winter clothes at all. So they take all that crap and they give me all brand new dress screens. I had no dress screens. I had, you know, all new shoes because mine were moldy and everything. So they tailor fit your dress screens, and then I had to go to a debriefing on what I can and can't talk about, how to talk at the table. You know, it's not pass the effing butter and this. So I'm going through a debriefing, acclimating back into social life, and getting all new clothes and everything. And so, and now I've caught a cold. I got this cold. Okay, so now I get on my civilian, and your leave doesn't start until you get home. So I'm already 12 hours or more late from, I was extended 3 days, that put me 3 days behind. Now I'm late leaving Travis. So, okay, now I'm on this flight and I'm flying home. Grand Rapids is snowed in. So they send us up to Muskegon. Well, they had called my folks that told them that our flight was being delayed. Okay, I'm gonna take a bus or a taxi bus from Muskegon. So, okay, well, we get up to Muskegon and the storm quit in Grand Rapids. So they turn around and fly us back to Grand Rapids. So now we land in Grand Rapids and I got a call home. Hey, Pops, I'm home. Well, where's that? Well, I'm at the airport. So, you know, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So I was 3 or 4 days late getting home, and what a fiasco that was. I mean, just one problem after another.
Okay.
So,
And now you're not done with your enlistment yet either.
oh no.
Okay, so you leave home. How long were you sick? You had your cold.
I had a cold. I could not, my eyes were watering so bad. But I bought some contacts and
Cold medicine,
I
yeah.
took now they're 12-hour, right? So I pop a couple of them and my eyes finally dried up. Well, I happened to be sitting next to a fella that owned the Ford tractor place in Granville, Michigan. They sold Ford tractors, and he happened to know my dad because my dad's from Granville, the Jamieson homestead's right there and everything. I happened to be sitting right next to him, and we got to talking, and I couldn't buy a drink. I mean, they were buying me drinks. I mean, of course, I'm in uniform, and I wasn't say I was drunk, but with the cold, I wasn't feeling any pain when I got home. And so that made it a nice flight. You know, I think, well, shit, you know, everybody says that, you know, you're treated like crap. Well, on the airplane and in the airport, I was treated pretty good. People were buying, of course, there's a lot of servicemen in there, but people were buying me a drink and stuff. But hell, this ain't gonna be bad until I get home. Even in the Grand Rapids area here, it was not good. But, so I'm home on leave for 30 days. And I already know where I'm going. I'm going to Fort Meade, Maryland, 6th Armored Cav. So that's after my leave. We had a good time at home. I got hooked up again with my girlfriend and bought a snowmobile. And I had him paint Kong Chaser on it. I don't know if you want to get into this or not.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
So I don't know if you know of Michigan Out of Doors with Morton F. Bruce Grant on the radio. Well, those are friends of my dad's. They're all from Granville.
Yep.
And so Roger Perrin owned a snowmobile dealership in Granville, Perrin's Marina. My dad knew him. So I worked for him the 30 days that I was home, just putting snowmobiles together. You know, a couple hours here, a couple hours. It wasn't never a job. He would pay me spending money.
Right.
So on Sundays, Bruce Grant would come to Roger Perrin's and bring a bottle, and my dad have coffee. And well, I bought a snowmobile and had him paint Kong Chaser on it. Then I had it hopped up a little bit. So Roger would use my snowmobile as a demo. And people thinking that the snowmobile they buy like this is going to be as fast as mine was. Well, it wasn't, of course. So anyways, Morton F. had a safari between Croton and Hardy Dam in the wintertime. And he landed on his ski plane, and the camera crew got out, and they're taking pictures. And well, they happened to look at my snowmobile and it says Kong Chaser on it. Well, that was the name of our howitzer. He didn't know what that meant. So I explained to him. So I ended up on Michigan Out of Doors, Morton F. They were doing a show of the safari. They had
Right.
hot dogs and snowmobiling. And then one of the segments was on my snowmobile. So I got to go on this. But yeah, so home was fun.
Okay, and now off to Fort Meade.
Off to Fort Meade. I get there at night, and that's fine. They stick me in the 6th Armored Cav. Nobody there. I got there on a Friday night. Cool. Okay, so no duties, no nothing. I'm assigned to the gun battery, the howitzer battery. So I got the whole weekend to screw off. Well, my cousin, Chuck DeVries, lived in Chevy Chase. So I called him up. So I took a cab over to his house. So I actually spent the weekend with my cousin at Chevy Chase, and he took me all around and everything. And then I reported back. I had to sign out, and I reported back in again. Well, then on Monday morning, then you get assigned where you're going to be and what gun battery you're on, and or gun crew and all that kind of stuff. And so I was there for a while. Well, then the 1st Army is there also, and they wanted recruits for the rifle team. So, hell, I'll sign up. I'll try out for it. So there's like 200 of us trying out for the rifle team. And you have to shoot expert every time you shoot. And they needed 8 slots filled. So I kept shooting expert until they whittled us down to 8. So by the end of the day, I was on the 1st Army National Rifle Pistol Team.
Okay.
If my battery commander would release me, and he did. So I'd get up in the morning and go to chow, and then I'd make the 0600 formation, all present accounted for, make up my bunk, and my reporting station was the 1st Army National Rifle Pistol Team. So I'd get a ride, and I spend all day on the rifle team shooting,
Okay.
shooting. And if you weren't in a competition, then you were an instructor. So the guys on AIT, when they'd have to march to the rifle range and learn how to shoot, the cadre, that was us. You'd wear the steel or the helmet liner that says cadre on it.
Yep.
And so, or instructor, and that's what I did when the rifle team people were the cadre. And so that's what I did for the time that I was there. I traveled up and down the East Coast shooting rifle competition. I had 2 match grade M14s, instructing on the M60, M16, M14, the thump gun, demonstration on the 50. We didn't teach the 50, just a demonstration. So that was fun until the riots started.
Okay.
Martin Luther King had been assassinated in April, and but it started out as a Vietnam protest. And so the 101st Airborne, I believe, had the Capitol building. 82nd Airborne had the White House, or vice versa, I can't get them straight. 6th Armored Cav had the surrounding area. Our unit had from Louisiana, and this is on Concord, the main street, Louisiana to Pennsylvania. That's where I had to patrol. And different guys had different streets, and we were all spread out. So for 3 days, we would patrol that in rioting. People were throwing jars of urine at you, bags of feces, dog manure, human crap, and stuff like that. You would form a V, and then you had fixed bayonets, and you'd just march right into the crowd and disperse them if they would. But they had us, the 6th Armored Cav was in dress greens. Now, we weren't airborne, but we were in dress greens with bloused pants. In other words, you wore your combat boots with, like the airborne would. Black leather gloves, pistol belt, helmet liner, no steel pot helmet liner, and the Cav wore an ascot. Like the Cav wore, the first and the fourth wore a yellow ascot.
Careful with the microphone there.
Oh, okay. Wore a yellow ascot. Ours was red. And so instead of wearing a shirt and a tie, you wore your shirt, khaki shirt under your greens, but you wore a red ascot. It's like a turtleneck thing. And then you wore your pistol belt and 2 ammo pouches with loaded magazines. We had 80 rounds. And then you wore your bayonet and 2 canteens of water. And that's what we wore. And so you were spit and polish. They wanted the people to see that you weren't a bunch of reserve. There was no National Guard, no reservists. So you wore all your medals, and you were dressed to the hilt. I mean, when we pulled up into a group, we were on the back of a deuce and a half with a canvas off, and they'd have us stand up, and then right and left detail, you know, left turn, right turn, whatever. So they'd have us take out our bayonets, and it was, you know, on my command, fix bayonet. So you'd fix bayonet. You'd take your bayonet out, and then you'd mount it, and they'd say, fix bayonets. You'd have like 20-some guys on the truck go, and there's people all around you, and they're looking up at you, watching, thinking, okay, now what are these guys going to do? On my command, load magazine. So you'd undo your pouch, take out a loaded magazine, and we'd wrap it on our head to make sure the rounds were all in the back, and they'd say, load magazine, and then you'd go, everybody would go at the same time. On my command, load 1 round. So you'd put your hand up, and they'd say, load 1 round. People could see that round going into the magazine. Okay. So then they'd have us exit the vehicle or the truck, demount, they called it, because you're in a cab, you mount your truck, you don't climb it. So, and then we'd form the V, and then there'd be guys in here with the thump guns, with tear gas. And so whether they had us use tear gas or not, you had your M17 protective gas mask. But we would just march into the crowd, and if they wouldn't move, you'd put the bayonet right here and stand them right up on their tiptoes. And then if they came down, call an ambulance, you know, and haul a lot of people away. But they would disperse and get out of our way. But we, you know, we didn't put up with any bullshit. And that was the first 3 days. When the looting started, now the police are with us, okay, or actually we're with them, because we had rules that we had to abide by. So when the looting started, then now the police are with us, because Congress declares martial law, or somebody did, usually Congress, because they're run, DC is run by Congress. So now we don't need search warrants. So when you see a car loaded with stereos and TVs, or a quarter of a cow sticking out the trunk frozen, you just point the rifle at them at an intersection, they'd stop, jerk them out, put handcuffs on them, they'd put them in a paddy wagon that had 10 or 12 people, hands over the bar, they'd drive away, empty them out, and come back. So we did that for 8 days.
Wow.
And throwing tear gas, we had CS1 riot tear gas grenades. We'd go through buildings, because they're block-long apartment buildings, and you would just start at one end and pull the pin and throw it on, because they're fiberglass, they would break. And then people were putting towels under the cracks of the doors, and we got credited for saving a baby. The tear gas came through it, and CS1 riot, it's a tear gas, but it also causes nausea and vomiting and dry heaves, and now your stomach ruptures, now you're vomiting up blood. I mean, it could kill you. So they handed this baby out, and one of our sergeants laid the baby on the hood of the car and started doing CPR, and supposedly saved this baby's life. And of course, he gets acclimates for it. But we didn't put up with that crap. I mean, we were in Arlington Cemetery in tents for 11 days, and the rioting. And yeah, it was not fun. I mean, here you go through a year of Vietnam, and this is how you're treated. What a rude awakening that is.
Yeah.
And you get, this is part of my PTSD. I can't stand guys with ponytails. It just drives me absolutely nuts. And it's taken me a long time to get over that. And Asians, and it's just the flower power people, the hippies. It just
You associate that with that experience.
with the riots.
Yeah.
Yep. It's just
All right.
yeah. I don't get nightmares over that. It just pisses me off. It upsets me. Yeah.
All right. Now, before that happened, were you giving any thought to staying in the Army, or?
Oh, yeah. The in the meantime, I had taken a OCS test, 3 hours and something long, and I passed it. So you've got like 30 days or whatever to make up your mind if you want to enlist. So my wife now, her and I were talking. We weren't engaged or anything, but yeah, talking marriage and stuff like that. She says, well, if we're ever thinking about marriage, she says, then you in Vietnam was too hard. You barely made it through the first year. And I told her I was guaranteed 1 more year, because once you become an officer, you got to serve 3 more years.
Yep.
I was guaranteed 1 more year in Vietnam, maybe 2. And she says, you barely made it through the first one. And she says, so if you're thinking about getting the service, then there's no chance of us getting married. And I thought, oh, geez, what do I? And the thought of still being a school teacher, that came into mind. And so I elected not to go back into the service.
Okay.
And as it is, the girlfriend then, we've been married 48 years now, and so she's put up with a lot of stuff from me, and the counseling and whatnot. So, and as is, I ended up with a good job with the phone. I ended up being an engineer anyways. So.
Okay. Yeah. So what kind of job did you get then when you got out?
I bounced around. I was a mechanic. I worked in the septic tank business with my cousin, the plumber's septic tank service. Millionaire now, but the boys are. But anyways, I bounced around being a truck mechanic and a car mechanic, and finally got a job with the phone company in 1974. And I worked as a top craft splicer, and then a crew leader. It's called a technical leader. I did that for 5 years, and then they promoted me to an engineer. I was still taking classes. I never did get a degree, but they would hire engineers out of college and put them with me for 2 or 3 weeks to teach them the ropes. And so finally, Dorothy DeBain, the 4th level over engineering, she said, we just might as well make you an engineer. So even without a degree. And then they needed an engineer in Marquette in the Upper Peninsula. So this is back in '93, and the wife said, yeah, sure, we'll go to Marquette. So I was up there for 8 years. And then I came back down here, and I was an engineer and then a training development manager. I hired 25 splicers. They were starting up a new construction department, and I hired 2 first-level managers and got them trained and equipped. Went back to being an engineer, and then I ended up being an air pressure manager. And I says, I'll do it for 2 years, and I'm going to retire. So I retired at age 57 after I got over my prostate cancer. I says, life's too short. I put my 30 years in, and so I retired at 57.
Okay. But you're still a busy man.
Oh.
What are you doing now?
I'm volunteering for LZ, Michigan. That's got me quite busy. I do a lot with the schools. My grandson is going into 9th grade, but I was his daycare person when he was 1.5 years old. He was high-end autistic. I had to take him to Mary Free Bed 5 days a week for 2 hours for oral motor skills and speech therapy. So him and we're really close. That was my wife calling to say that Travis won't be over until 4:30. Him and I are going to make a platform for a shed. But he's a big boy, big kid. 15. He's in what they call Peaks class. So he's been taking, in the 8th grade, he took 9th grade classes. Now he's in 9th grade, he's taking 10th grade classes. He was in the Grand Rapids Youth Symphony. He's in orchestra and symphony and jazz band at Kentwood. He's hoping to get a scholarship. He plays the stand-up bass, electric bass, and guitar. So I do a lot of volunteer work at schools. I go on field trips. I help the orchestras. I also teach gun safety, hunter safety for the DNR. I've done that for 38 years. So I do instructional shooting, rifle shooting. I've worked with some SWAT folks on their rifle shooting, and people, they just want to learn how to shoot their rifles better. So I am with a gun club here in town. I have a 5th wheeler at Selkirk Lake, so I fish. I hunt all the time. I go out west. I shoot prairie dogs. The wife and I both ride motorcycles. She rides a 3-wheeler, and I ride a motorcycle. And so I'm not home much.